Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tenpenny Files. I'm your host, Dr. Sherri Tenpenny. On the Tenpenny Files, we dive into vital and often controversial discussions on topics that will challenge what you've been told and then reveal what's been hidden. These compelling conversations will make you think, spark debate, and hopefully move you to action. Join me here each day at 3 p.m. Eastern to hear from authors and documentary filmmakers who have something important to say but have often been censored or silenced. Today's conversation is with my guest, geologist and best-selling author and executive director of the CO₂ Coalition, Gregory Wrightstone, to talk about his latest book, a very convenient warming, how modest warming and more CO₂ are benefiting humanity. Gregory, thank you so much for joining us here today, and welcome to the Tenpenny Files.
It's good to be back on with you, Sherri. Thank you for having me. It's a fascinating subject, and actually you talked about being canceled and silenced, which I have been, and my our colleagues at the CO₂ Coalition. But boy, that's really changing and changing quickly. So um, things are different than they were just 9 months or a year ago.
Oh,
And
that's exciting news. So, why don't you, as a geologist, give us a little bit of your background and how you got involved in this climate change issue?
yeah, I had a 30-year career as a petroleum geologist, and I was actually at the forefront of the new shale gas revolution that combined horizontal drilling and massive hydraulic fracturing. I did the groundbreaking, some of the early work on the Marcellus Shale of the East, which is the largest natural gas accumulation in the world by far. So it was really exciting. Those were heady times because we were figuring it out as we went, trying to find out what's the best place to go, where to drill, how to do it. And then I left that. I was a founding partner of a large energy company, and then I was always interested in climate change. And I had a time when I had to move out of the business, and I used that time to actually research some of the questions I had about climate change. And I was able to go back. I knew that some of what we were being told was just wrong. I suspected other things. And so I did a deep dive. I went back and said, I'm going to look at the actual data for each of these supposed scares and climate crises. And what I found, frankly, angered me. What I found was rather than sea level rise being catastrophic and putting islands underwater, just the opposite was happening, that warming is actually very, very good for humanity. And CO₂, that they're calling the demon molecule, has huge beneficial effects. And so what I did, my first book was Inconvenient Facts, which was a runaway bestseller. And in that, I documented that there was no climate crisis. In this new book, A Very Convenient Warming, I go further, and as we do at the CO₂ Coalition, by almost every metric you look at, we find that Earth's ecosystems are thriving and prospering, and humanity is benefiting from modest warming and more CO₂. I call it the greatest untold story of the 21st century, that of a thriving of the Earth and a prospering of the human condition. And so we should embrace this. It's a story that needs told. Instead of being silenced, we need to get out there and get the truth out there about what's going on. You were silenced during COVID for sure. We know that for a fact. But I will say, I think that what they're doing with climate and the climate realists like myself might even be they've gone beyond what was the COVID silencing. They've said there's no discussion. It's a consensus. Everyone agrees, and we will not put you on the air or have you talk because the science is settled. And we
And
find out,
we heard that before, right?
oh my goodness, and it's been crazy. I've been very optimistic for many years because I kept saying the truth will win out. I'm sure you said that yourself about what we were talking about, vaccines and the like. I said the truth will win out. We have the facts on our side. And once we finally get a voice and can start talking directly to the people, it's going to be game over for this climate industrial complex. And that's what we're seeing. People are hearing our message. Again, it's a message of science, facts, and data versus misinformation and disinformation. So I like telling a really good story. Here we are at the Christmas season. I like to say about the climate change story. I bring you glad tidings of great joy.
Oh, that's very
At
good.
this time, because it's a really, really good story about what's actually happening.
You
And
know,
so,
in your book, you called carbon dioxide the miracle molecule. And I think by what you just said about it, by every metric that it shows that it is, I mean, instead of demonizing it, and I want to read one thing from your book. It says, future emissions from burning fossil fuels will add little to global warming, and what does occur will improve forests, grasslands, and agriculture through CO2 fertilizations. I mean, that is amazing, and that is certainly not what we're hearing from the mainstream at all.
yeah, and you look at it, it's actually, we are in a warming trend. There's no doubt about that. It's been warming it started more than 300 years ago. Bear in mind, they're saying that increasing carbon dioxide is driving dangerous and unprecedented climate or temperature increases. But the warming trend that we're in began 200 plus years before we started adding much CO2 to the atmosphere in the mid 20th century. And so they're saying, oh, well, that all changed in 1950 or 1945, and now it's being driven by CO2. That's just the science, the facts, and the data don't support that. And so it's this warming is almost as beneficial as, and maybe more, than the increase of CO2. Because the warming, think about it. We know it's warming. We can look at some pretty basic things, like, for example, the boreal forests of Canada have increased northward almost 100 kilometers since 1900. Why is that? Because it's warming. And growing seasons in the continental United States have increased nearly 2 weeks in length of the growing season. That's really, really good for the agriculture community. And Sherri, if you're Dr. Tenpenny, if you own an apple orchard in Michigan, what do you fear the most? It's a late spring killing frost that can just ruin your whole year. Because of this warming, we have fewer late spring killing frosts to ruin your year and ruin your crops. And so we get more plantings in, and then that's turbocharged by uh, increases in carbon dioxide. If you remember back, our children used to learn when they were being taught things like the scientific method we'll get to that in a moment, that they're not being taught anymore, unless you're in Florida or North Carolina. They learned about photosynthesis. And, with photosynthesis, vegetation needs sunlight, water, and CO2, and the more CO2, the better. And so what we have here is just a stunning increase in vegetation from the near polar regions to the equator. Every single ecological niche has seen a boom, an increase in vegetation. And it's funny, one of the things that the alarmists talk about, well, poison ivy is going to increase in the future because of warming and more CO2. And they're right, because because poison ivy and CO2 is an equal opportunity benefactor of vegetation. So will it increase growth of poison ivy? Yeah, probably will, because it's going to help everything. Uh,
That's
but
great.
and that's one of the few things that they've actually got right, that they tried to alarm people about. But all the other vegetation around the poison ivy will also increase, so it's not probably not. Uh, and so this is a really, really, really good story that's gone unreported. And we'll get to this in a little bit. Having looked at my book, one of my favorite topics is the strong relationship between human history and temperature history, defined as completely opposite of what we're being told. And it's a fun topic. And I like history, and relating that to climate change it's enlightening and a lot of fun.
How did the globalists get it so wrong, or better, why have they gotten it so wrong and led to the biggest misrepresentation by the mainstream narrative that we are just we have to give pills to cows to keep them from farting, and that are now killing them, and we have to shut down agriculture in Belgium, and all the things that are going on in Europe, with them, the farmers protesting there. Why are they doing this?
Yeah, I'm asked that question a lot, and I'm hesitating here because as a scientist, I can't look inside men's and women's souls to see what their motivation is. You can't. We
Of
could guess
course.
at some things. A lot of people have said they want to bring down Western civilization. They want to destroy capitalism. They want to, whatever the reason is. And some of these people that are funding this, we know who they are: George Soros and the Tides Foundation and other these organizations that really don't like the Western world. They don't like democracy. They want to lift up, but again, there are some of these people that actually believe what they're saying. There's some people that have not a clue about the science. I would include Al Gore and, of course, Greta Thunberg in that. Al Gore took one science course at the university. He got a D in it. So he's not a stellar star, but that's one more course than Greta Thunberg ever took. And but she's busy talking about Palestine and Hamas and the rest now. She's kind of moved away from climate change. But it's been so the reasoning is I don't know, but what it is, it's going to be completely this quest for net zero, which would be zero carbon emissions, net emissions into the atmosphere. It's cost trillions, and to get to where they want it to be, I've seen tens of trillions of dollars that would need to be spent, and that's money that should be placed. Think of that, the good that that could do with that money. Or how about if we just don't spend it at all? That's one way to look at it is instead of spending $30 trillion to solve a non-existent climate problem, why don't we spend it on world hunger? Oh, we're already solving that, aren't we? We're already solving world hunger by allowing CO2 to increase and warming temperatures. And we'll talk about agriculture in a little bit. Just it's a great story. How
You
we're
know, you've
uh,
decisively shown that nitrous oxide emissions, like with farming and things like that, and with the fertilizer, since we're starting to talk about farming a little bit, that these emissions have a trivial effect on temperature increases. Yet farmers around the world and in Europe are being forced out of business because of the climate change tyrants. How can your information in your book, A Very Convenient Warming, the name of your book, how can this help them?
well, we've done that. We've just attended we were the sponsor of the Second World Conference on Sustainable Livestock Development in Spain. Our chairman, Dr. William Happer, emeritus professor of physics at Princeton, spoke there. He just got back from and of course in Spain and across Europe, they're trying to uh, get rid of livestock. And he spent 10 days in New Zealand, touring New Zealand, because New Zealand's nuts about this. And let me just correct you one thing that you've got a little bit wrong, if I can be so
Please,
bold.
please, please, please.
It's not what comes out the back end of the cow. It's what's
Right. It's
bel-
the front
it's
end.
it's
Right.
the front end. It's belching that they are belching methane because
Yes.
they're called ruminants, and the ruminants, deer, buffalo, cattle, sheep, uh, all eat grass, which is we can't. They're the only ones that can digest grass because of the lignin and things that are in the grass. But they're able to take it into their stomachs in an anoxic environment, no oxygen, and convert that into meat, milk, and other useful products. And so what they have is these ruminants then they belch out the methane because what they're doing is and just bear in mind the methane that they're warning us about only has about a 5 year life. Its half life is about 5 or 6 years. So it actually degrades into each methane molecule, which is CH4, one carbon and four hydrogen in the methane molecule. It combines and oxidizes, the result is CO2, one molecule of CO2 and two molecules of water vapor. And so that's what methane turns into. And the warming effect, it is a greenhouse gas, but the warming effect of this incredibly small amounts of methane, it's 0. I think there are three zeros and then another digit. It's thousandths of a degree of warming that will occur by 2100, which is, and they're talking about. I was in the Netherlands. My book was translated into Dutch last year, and we toured the Netherlands, and I was speaking across there as they were debating this, and I was saying, no, 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 you need to roll this back. They were going to kill half of all the livestock in the Netherlands, and the
Wow.
people rose up. The farmers had a tractor, they drove their tractors on all over the Netherlands to block everything, and they ended up not doing it, thankfully. And so what we can do is, so we can show number one, this is a really bad idea. And number two, any warming effect is so small as to be, it's barely distinguishable from zero in terms of the warming. And so we should embrace this and embrace uh, the livestock that are actually consuming the grasses that would otherwise grow up. And also think about this. There were about as many buffalo, which is a ruminant, in North America as there are cattle today. And the buffalo were eating grass and belching methane about the same amount as what modern agriculture livestock development is doing. Well, that was natural and that was okay. But now we've got cattle that we're actually benefiting from by giving us protein and milk and nice leather jackets, if you like that. And so we've got it's crazy, and people understand when they say these type of things that it's just you just shake your head at some of the things they're trying to do. It's
No, in both of your books, in the Very Convenient Warming and your other book, the Inconvenient Facts book, there are lots, and this one, the newer one, there are lots and lots of graphs and charts and things in there. And you have shown really decisively, and the text that goes along with it decisively, that if the levels of carbon dioxide more than double from current levels, the increase in warming would be less than 10%. But that has been so suppressed. Why isn't anyone embracing all of the scientific data that you put forth?
well, one of the things they do with these, they admit they being the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and those promoting this climate crisis, they come up with about the same numbers as we do. The warming effect of a doubling of CO2 is less than 1/10 of 1 degree Celsius. All right. But what they do to make it sound worse is, or excuse me, I got that wrong. It's less than 1 degree. I said 1/10, 1 degree Celsius. They turn that into 4.5 or sometimes 8 degrees of warming for a doubling. And that's because they're saying, well, there are uh, uh, factors that are adding to the warming effect. Because if you warm, there'll be more water vapor in the atmosphere. And the biggest greenhouse gas, of course, is water vapor with the warming. And so they're using these factors to quadruple, quintuple, instead of 8/10 of a degree of warming, and with a doubling, they're saying it's 4.5 up to 8.5 degrees of warming, which would be a lot. And so and what we find is that in nature, most of the effects would actually be opposite. Nature reacts uh, uh, to alleviate changes. So if you're warming and you're creating more water vapor, that's actually probably going to have a cooling effect. They don't recognize that because if there is more water vapor, there are more clouds. More clouds, what does that mean? More reflection of sunlight that never makes it to the earth to warm the earth or to increase the greenhouse warming effect. So it's
Where did they ever get this crazy idea of global dimming? That they wanted to block out the sun, which is the creator of everything, the giver of life to plants, animals, amphibians, humans. What is the thought of that?
well, there's talk about this. It's called geoengineering, and
Ah,
it's not actually happening on a grand scale, but they're talking about it. And this is really, really, I mean, what could go wrong? Well, a lot could go wrong. They're trying to block the sun. Who knows the bad thing, the consequences of that? And there's a lot of disinformation out there about chemtrails that uh, we've got airplanes that are spreading sulfites into the atmosphere from just because, and they're contrails from the jets because jets burn jet fuel, which is basically, again, it's a fossil fuel. It's basically diesel. And when you burn it, what do you get? Water vapor and carbon dioxide. And that water vapor, twice as much water vapor as CO2 goes out of the jet, and it condenses when you have a high humidity, high atmospheric water vapor percentages. You get contrails on a very dry day up at 40,000 feet. You don't get any contrails, but you do when there's a high humidity. So beware those talking about chemtrails. It's could it be done? Yes. Is it being done? No. And we ought to put a dampening on this.
Well, I would love to hear you debate some of my friends and researchers that are on the opposite side of that scale. Because there is a diversity of opinions about that.
Yeah, opinions are okay, but this is so easily debunked. There's a fellow by the name of Dane Wigington that's the leader of this chemtrail movement. And it's just, if you go to our website, which is CO2Coalition.org, and just search for, we've got a great search feature there, just search for chemtrails. And we have Dr. Roy Spencer, one of our members, wrote a pretty interesting and easily understandable explanation of what these are. And these are water vapor being emitted by jet airplanes that's causing this.
Well, your message is so far off of the mainstream propaganda about climate change. It's interesting how it used to be all about global warming, and now they've changed it to climate change. Is kind of the language they're using. Have you or the CO2 Coalition have been targeted or censored? And if so, what have they tried to do to shut down the really important science that you have to share?
Oh my, yes. Let's just say Instagram. We weren't on. I said we got to be on Instagram. We got to hear message. So we got up on that Instagram. They blocked us before we were able to make our first post on Instagram, and so we've been trying to get work around that. LinkedIn might be the worst. I was being shadow banned, and this would have been 3.5, 4 years ago. Uh, every post I made on LinkedIn, I had a huge following, 20,000 plus, 25,000. Just, a lot of my material went viral because it's pretty interesting and it's science based. And everything I was posting, they would remove, call it false and misleading, and remove it. And my very last post on LinkedIn, I said, I think I'm about to be banned and deplatformed. They removed that post, called it false and misleading, and then banned and deplatformed. Now that's funny. Now that is funny. And so I was off. I was off. They wouldn't allow me to get back on. I was off for almost 3 years. And suddenly, uh, 4 months ago, I was back on LinkedIn. I said, okay, well, so I'm back up now. But I've had other colleagues on LinkedIn that got the same. Of course, Twitter or X now is a wide open space, so we're free to post what we want there. Um, but if you still look on LinkedIn, I as of last week, they were blocking, so you couldn't even see my posts on LinkedIn. You had to go back to 4 years ago where if you go on my LinkedIn account, were the only ones you could find. And so they're still
Wow.
doing it. And so, yeah, we're being silenced. And again, they're using this, it's called the consensus opinion. You've heard of this. 97% of climate scientists say that we're having unusual and unprecedented warming, and it's being driven by carbon dioxide, which is the control knob of atmospheric temperature. And the science is settled. There is no debate. You must be silenced. And again, it's consensus. Uh, Michael Crichton, there's some great quotes about that. Michael Crichton, the great author, he wrote, he said, science is not consensus and consensus is not science. My favorite quote was by Nobel Physics laureate Richard Feynman, who said, now think about it, this is a great quote. I would rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned.
Ooh, that's very good.
You will use that. You're going to use that going forward.
That's very, very good.
And so, and
That's really
that's
good.
what we have. That's what we have. We're told what the answer is, and you dare not question us. You dare not. You must be silenced because we're right, you're wrong, and it's. But
And the
again,
science is finished, like the science is ever done, right? It's never done. I think this is a really good place, Greg, for us to take a quick break to hear from our sponsors, because that is a great place for to let that sink in. You know, we have to have things to be questioned. Everything needs to be questioned. So let's take a really quick break here to hear from our sponsors from AmericaOutloud.news. America Out Loud Talk Radio plays the Tenpenny Files on iHeartRadio Network every day, Monday through Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. You can also listen anywhere in the world by going to AmericaOutloud.news and clicking into their media player. Not only can you hear the Tenpenny Files, but you can hear the other podcasters on that platform. And if you've missed any of our great conversations that we have to really make you think off of the mainstream, you can find the Tenpenny Files on Spotify, Pandora, Apple, TuneIn, iHeart Virtual Studios, and on my platforms. You can go to drtenpenny.com, hover over the podcast tab. The first link that's down there will show you the guests that we're going to have on for the week, and then everything is archived that you can watch it there. You can also see them on our Substack, which is drtenpenny.substack.com, that they're posted there every day, and also on Rumble. With so many great books and so many good documentaries and so little time to read and to watch, this show is meant to maximize your time and jumpstart your interest and hopefully introduce you to topics that you haven't heard about before and inspire you to dig into this incredible work that we bring our authors to you to talk about the research that they put in front of you that you aren't going to hear in the mainstream. We are going to hear from our sponsors right now that they keep us on the air. They keep America Out Loud on AmericaOutloud.news on the air. We are going to take a short break. We will be right back. Zeolite is a detox spray. We work specifically with a company called Touchstone Essentials. They are an incredible company. We've been working with them now for several years. And zeolite is a mineral that goes through your body like a one-way basket. It will clean out heavy metals such as arsenic and mercury, aluminum, cadmium, and it hooks onto those metals from a one-way perspective. So once it's bound, it goes out through your urine or your stools and doesn't get redeposited in other places. Everybody needs to have a detox product in their life, and this one is so easy to use and it's so safe. You can take it when you're pregnant, you can take it when you're nursing, you can give it to little children, you can even give it to infants, and quite frankly, I give it to my dog. I actually put a little bit of the zeolite in his water because until we all stop living in a toxic world, we all need to get some of those extra toxicities out, the heavy metals, the persistent organic pollutants, the things that are floating through the air, the different things that we come in touch with in our environment. And we are a big fan of zeolite from Touchstone Essentials. We've been a big fan of their products for several years. Go to drtenpenny.com/detox to get your first bottle of zeolite spray for $50 off.
Well, only when the government bows to the people will America become great again. This is Malcolm Out Loud here. Join me in pushing back against censorship, my fellow Americans. Right at the top of AmericaOutloud.news are the words: many voices, one freedom, united in the First Amendment. Now is our time, my fellow Americans. AmericaOutloud.news, liberty and justice for all.
Well, welcome back, everyone. Today, we're talking with Gregory Wrightstone about his latest book, A Very Convenient Warming, How Modest Warming and More CO2 Are Benefiting Humanity. But let me tell you a little bit more about our guest, Gregory Wrightstone. Gregory is a geologist, best-selling author, and executive director of the CO₂ Coalition, the preeminent scientific organization in the world that disputes the consensus narrative of man-made catastrophic warming. His first book, Inconvenient Facts, The Science That Al Gore Doesn't Want You to Know, was a #1 bestseller on Amazon multiple times. Mr. Wrightstone's expertise has earned him a position as an expert reviewer for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is really important. Greg, welcome back to the show. Is there a consensus on climate change, or is it really man-made, or is it just one of the warming and cooling cycles of the planet?
No, it certainly is there a warming effect from increasing CO2? Yes, it's just not very great. And it's overwhelmed by the natural forces. And again, the greenhouse effect is a real thing. But again, the biggest greenhouse gas is water vapor, probably 90%, 85, 90, depending on the humidity of the atmosphere. But it's around 90% from the greenhouse gas warming is water vapor. And CO2 and the other greenhouse gases that are where you emit methane, CO2, nitrous oxide, those things have an extremely small amount. And we're seeing that the natural forces that you referenced are the main drivers of CO2, of temperature increases and decrease. There were really big drivers that are the related to planetary effects that are on, for example, the wobble of the Earth. They're called the Milankovitch cycles. And those are the things that cycle us between terrible, very cold glacial advances and the welcome interglacial periods like we're in now, thankfully. But it's mainly the big natural forces that have been, if you look over the back over the last 10,000 years, there have been 9 other great warming trends. We're in a warming trend like we talked about before. And we go back, if we look back to the first great uh, rise of empires and civilizations around the world, the Babylonians, the Hittites, the Assyrians, the Harappan Empire in the Indus River Valley, all of these great civilizations rose up during one of the really warm periods, which was called the Minoan warm period. And it was much, much warmer than it is today. And those civilizations flourished. But when it started getting cold, again, naturally driven cold, uh, all of those civilizations, all of those civilizations and empires collapsed maybe in as short as 50 or 100 years, all at the same time, likely all due to increasing or decreasing temperatures. The decreasing temperatures meant that they had crop failure, famine, pestilence, and mass depopulation. So each of the other warming trends over the last 5,000 or so years, the next was the Roman warm period, the medieval warm period, and then our current modern warming period. All of those were hugely beneficial to humanity. And it was the intervening cold periods that were just horrific. Again, each of the cold periods were associated with crop failure, famine, pestilence, and mass depopulation. That's not a good combination. And we will likely be there again at some point. No, we're not going to likely be. We will be there again. When will that occur? I don't know. We might be going into one of those cold periods right now. It might not be for 100 or 300 or 500 years, hopefully. But when it does come, it will be, again, the word I like to use is horrific. And
There's another book that's out there that's written. I admit I haven't read it, but I've heard the topic, and I've heard this gentleman on podcast before. He's written a book called Not by Fire, but by Ice. That would be kind of like the destruction of the planet, more than global warming and all this heat that's going on or claimed to be going on by the increasing of these gases. It would really be the what would be this destruction to humanity would be another ice age, to go
absolutely
from that way. I've said for a long time, it's better to, the difference between hot and cold is like, in cold, you can put on another sweater. When it gets hot, you can only go down the skin. You can't get
right.
cooler
I've
than.
not I've not heard of that book. I'm gonna have to buy that.
Yeah,
And
it's been around for a while. And
okay.
you might be interesting to hear what he has to say. That kind of goes along with what you're saying. In your book, A Very Convenient Warming, that temperature, that changes in temperature drive up CO2, not the other way around. Let me say that again for the audience. You say in your book that changes in temperature drive up CO2, not the other way around. It's not the elevation of CO2 that drives up the temperature. That's really astounding information when I read it in your book. And people, you guys really need to get this book. This is really amazing. And it's got all these incredible charts and graphs and documented data, but it's written in a language that people like me, who's not a geologist and not a scientist, can just, can really understand it and see the graphs and see it for yourself. I mean, that is astounding information. How is that so?
Well, it's counterintuitive that warming, it's really the oceans that are driving the big changes. Now we got to be a little, what's happening recently over the last 75 or so years is a little bit different because we are now emitting huge amounts of CO2 by burning fossil fuels. But over the last several million years, it was the oceans that were the great drivers of CO2 in and out of the atmosphere. A cold ocean sucks up CO2 out of the atmosphere into the cold oceans. A warming ocean expels CO2. So as the ocean warms, CO2 is increasing because of the temperature increase. And again, it's a little bit counterintuitive because normally you'd think, well, if you add salt or sugar to water, the hotter it is, the more you can add. It's just opposite for these gases. And so the cold oceans, again, suck up CO2, warming oceans expel it. But again, it's been turned on its head since we started the Industrial Revolution. And now the changes in atmospheric CO2 are definitely being controlled by what we're emitting. Again, when we burn fossil fuels, and again, we talked about methane, one of the easiest things that we can talk about is that methane molecule because it's a very simple molecule, uh, a carbon and four hydrogens it creates two molecules of water vapor and one molecule of carbon dioxide. And that's what's driving the increase. So before the Industrial Revolution, I'm not going to give you a bunch of numbers, but we were under 300 parts per million, 280. Today we're over 400 at 430. And so that's been a 50% increase of atmospheric carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And it's from us using fossil fuels. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay. And you know, I've got a large carbon footprint, thankfully, and I'm proud of it. We should all be proud because when you're doing that with a large carbon footprint, you're helping feed the planet, you're helping create and increase agricultural productivity, and also the fossil fuels. We talked about warming and CO2 greatly impacting and increasing agricultural productivity. There's a third leg of that stool that's really driving agricultural productivity, and that occurred in the 20th century with the increased use of nitrogen fertilizer, and that nitrogen fertilizer is created using mainly natural gas. And so we've got fossil fuel fueling nitrogen fertilizer, which is fueling agricultural productivity, which is turbocharged by warming and more CO2. And the agricultural productivity is, you'll hear me talking a lot about this because it's important. That's one of the most important things that's going on is instead of predictions of famine and drought, what we find is that agricultural productivity is outpacing population growth. And in the book you saw that I have a graph from the Our World in Data that documents that agricultural acreage being used is pretty flat, so it's not increasing, but agricultural productivity is greatly outpacing the population growth. And so it's another one of these claims that are just not so.
You know, climate anxiety among young people is really real. I mean, you mentioned Greta Thunberg, who, you know, kind of like cranked up the anxiety with her theatrics, I will call them. But other than her, young people are really concerned. I mean, there are groups of young girls that have decided they are never going to have children because they don't want to bring them into the world because the world's going to end. And it seems like young people tend to have more anxiety about the future anyways. What is the CO₂ Coalition doing
Oh,
to help address that issue?
yeah, that's one of it's a great pride that I take in what we've done. I had members that came to us a few years ago, came to me and said they were very concerned about the state of science education in the United States, really globally, but in the United States. They were concerned their grandchildren were being inducted into this climate cult, that they were being taught groupthink and consensus science and not being taught critical thinking skills or the scientific method. And so we did something about that, created our climate initiative. We call it education, not indoctrination. And so we've created a whole series of books, illustrated, uh, basically comics, but they're science based, wonderfully illustrated videos that are science-based. And importantly, Dr. Sharon Camp is our senior education advisor. She's got a PhD in analytic chemistry. She was an AP Science teacher. She's an AP Science reader, a gifted scientist. She creates our lesson plans. We provide that at no charge. Go to our website, co2learningcenter.org. The whole homeschool community has really embraced us. We attended 6 different education conferences this year. We'll do about the same next year. And again, the homeschool community just loves us because we provide this material free of charge. And my latest book actually is Chloe the Clownfish Sleeps Well. And it's what we call the Sleep Well series. Again, we're able to use these wonderfully illustrated books. Chloe lives on the Great Barrier Reef. She's a clownfish, and she was taught in school that her home and her family were in great danger because of climate change and man-made warming, and they were all in great danger. And so I worked and collaborated with Dr. Peter Ridd of Australia, noted expert on the Great Barrier Reef, to create this book to get the science right. And so we're able to tell the story to Chloe that tells the truth about the Great Barrier Reef that's thriving and prospering. And so at the end of the story, of course, she's able to sleep well at night. And we repeat that. We've got a second one in the series coming up called Foxy the Fruit Bat Sleeps Well, about a fruit bat on the Maldives island that again can't sleep because the island's going to be underwater in a few years. And so we're able to, and right now I'm working on one. It's called Melvin the Manatee Sleeps Well. And so I'm calling you from my home south of Tampa in Florida. And so Melvin and his mother live in the warm waters of Tampa Bay, but sometimes it gets very, very cold and they can't survive. And in 2020, there was a mass die-off because of the cold, very cold water. And these manatees, they look like they don't have blubber. They have no insulation. They look fat, and they are, but it's a non-insulating type of fat, like seals, walrus, and the other in the Arctic have blubber that are very good insulation. And so they'll die. These manatees will die. But Melvin and his mother are able to swim up the bay and into this inlet right north of where I am talking to you, to the Tico coal-fired power plant. And because of the coal-fired power plant, Melvin and his mother are able to survive cold spells in Tampa Bay. And so, they're going to hate this book, coal-fired power plant saving the manatees. And, but it's
I want to show this a little, like these illustrations to the people who are watching this. I know the people that are listening to it can't see it, but the people that are watching it, they're just delightful, and they're written to maybe 7 and 8 year olds. Is that about the level?
Yes,
And
college kids just and older, even the adults, they look at that and
they're lovely. It's really well written, and the diagrams and everything are delightful. But your entire book is like that. It's got diagrams like the history of the glacial retreat from Glacial Bay. And I love this one chart that we talked about just briefly, this one that talks about predictive modeling and how predictive modeling really doesn't have much to do with reality. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, Roy Spencer and his colleagues at the University of Alabama at Huntsville, they've taken a look. They're experts on temperature measurements using satellite data, and they've taken a look at the predictive models. There were over 100 of them, and out of the 100 models, there was only one of the models, climate models, that got it right, and that was the Russian model. And the Russian model nailed it pretty good. But all of the other models lumped together, over exaggerated. Is that a word? I don't think so, but it exaggerated warming like 2.5 to 3 times too much. And so what they're doing, and that's what a lot of this is based on. They're talking about spending trillions of dollars, and they're basing it on models that don't work and are just horribly flawed. And so we need to move away from that and look at the real world. What's the real world telling us? And,
you mentioned right before we started having our conversation here that, they're predicting these temperature rises to the year 2000 for 2100 for the years ahead. And, within 1/10 of a degree, and they can't even oftentimes accurately predict the weather tomorrow.
Yeah. This will make you laugh too. So what they're talking about, they're saying, you've probably heard this, if we get temperature increased by 1.5 degrees Celsius over the pre-industrial temperature, it's all over. Climate crisis, and doom and gloom, we're all going to die, crops will die. Okay. So they're saying it can't get more than 1.5 degrees. It's already warmed 1.2 degrees Celsius since 1850. So what they're really warning us about is 0.3 of a degree Celsius warming. That's half a degree Fahrenheit. Since we started this interview, your temperature in your studio there probably increased or decreased by that much, and you'd never know it. It increases by that much between 11 a.m. and noon every single day. And if you're that worried about half a degree warming, move 17 miles further north, and your average temperature will, will be half a degree Fahrenheit cooler than what it is where you are right now. And when you think about things like that and put it in that kind of context, it's stupid. And people just don't, they haven't thought this through at all. And again, history tells us that warming is really, really good. And so Al Gore, John Kerry, Greta Thunberg, they would call me a science denier. I would call them history deniers because they're denying what history tells us. History tells us conclusively that warming is good, cold is bad. We should welcome the warmth and fear the cold. That's what history tells us.
That's really, really good. You know, between your two books, I mean, because I think this came out, The Inconvenient Facts just came out about 2 years ago now.
Oh
It-
no, it's 2017 actually.
oh gosh. Okay. Well, what is the difference between your two? Because they're both wonderful. They're both there. You know, I get a lot of books that come through on my desk. And there are only a few that I hold on to definitely. And these are two of them that go on my permanent shelf back behind me.
Yeah, well,
So
thank you. The first book again, I go further in this next book. I talk more about the benefits of of what's actually happening. In the first book, my eyes, as I was going through it, my eyes got wide. I said, they're lying to us. They're lying to us about this, and this. And that's what I did in the first book, Inconvenient Facts, was to point out what they're getting wrong, what they're saying. They're telling you the X, and the truth is Y. This next book, I've gone beyond that to really tout just the wonderful benefits. And again, I bring you great tidings of glad joy, or is it glad tidings of great joy, whatever it is. It's a really good story. The second book is how beneficial it is. There is no climate crisis. And in fact, the world and our ecosystems are thriving and prospering. It's a story that needs to get out there, and it will get out there. But you had talked to me about our education component. You may not be aware, only 2 states in the United States teach the scientific method as part of the scientific curricula. Because of our work in 2024, we added North Carolina to add the scientific method. We were this close with Texas. And if Texas, if it, and we're confident we'll get it this year, we just ran out of time. And when Texas goes, there'll probably be another 13 or 15 other states that will go along with it, because as Texas does, other states follow. When it comes to science education, they'll be using the same books. And so we're out there teaching the people. We have people connect with us because of that. And again, grandparents care about their grandchildren. Parents care about their children, but they want a world, they want their children educated properly. They don't want, again, them to be taught consensus science and groupthink, which is what they're being taught today. And so we're doing something about it.
well, we've got just about 2 minutes left, Greg. What is the takeaway message from this whole thing about climate change, but specifically about a very convenient warming? And where's the best place for them to go to get your book?
Yeah, if you want the book, you just search for 2 words, convenient warming, and you'll find it. Uh, and for the Chloe the clownfish, just again search for Chloe the clownfish, and you'll be able. The easiest place is Amazon, of course, to buy it. And Chloe the clownfish, $7. Come on, you can afford. Go buy 5, and give it to all your grandkids or children. Spread the wealth, give it out. It's only $7. But convenient warming is, like you say, my goal. And I think from what you're telling me, I was successful in creating, uh, and I was going to say entertaining, but educational uh, book that's readable and understandable by those that aren't scientists. And that was my goal. And again, it was wonderfully illustrated with, I think there are 70 or 80 charts within the book. So it's not just all text, and it's in color.
And there you go. One last word, just for 1 minute, about the CO₂ Coalition.
Yeah, the CO₂ Coalition was formed 10 years ago. We're 200 plus of the top scientists and experts in the world that believe, as I do, that CO₂ is a huge benefit. Temperature is beneficial as well. And we're aiming to provide that information to political leaders as well. We produce large numbers of commentaries, scientific reports. We're doing amicus briefs and commenting on things like the Department of Energy endangerment finding, the various Department of Energy, or excuse me, that was the EPA endangerment finding. And so we're weighing in on Capitol Hill to provide I was going to say our facts. They aren't our facts. They are the facts about climate change. And so I'm very proud of what we've been doing. We've been very
Well, I'm really proud to have had you on the show here today, Greg, because your information that Wrightstone, Wrightstone, Greg White, has put out here for us is just amazing. And I think it's really, really, like you said, a good story that needs to be told. So I want to thank you so much for being here with us today, and thank all of our listeners who have listened to this. Please share this information and spread it around so that if you've got young people that have a lot of anxiety about climate change, you can bring them a story of glad tidings and good joy that it's really not true, and they can rest and sleep easily, like he's been talking about in this other book, Chloe the Clownfish. So with that, I want to close out with one of my favorite verses from the Bible. I close every one of my podcasts with, because it's so important, which is Romans 12:12. Rejoice in hope, be patient in trouble, and be persistent in prayer. Remember to lead into God. He'll never let you down. And see you here tomorrow or the next time at 3 p.m. Eastern on AmericaOutloud.news and iHeartRadio. You can find more about me by going to dr10penny.com. You can also find our podcasts there. You can find them on our Substack, which is dr10penny.substack.com, and my Sunday Substack, which is 10pennywalkwithgod.substack.com. Please follow me and like me on X and on Instagram. Both of those, it's at Busy Dr. T, Busy DRT. So have a great rest of your day, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. We'll see you here Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern. We'll see you tomorrow or the next time right here on the 10 Penny Files. Goodbye and God bless.